In this video, we'll walk through some basic examples of web scraping, starting with the scaffolding of a basic app using Express. We'll scrape the Google web page and log the contents to our console. Then, we'll create a stream using the FS module and save the URL that we pass in to request to a local folder. Finally, we'll use the on method to check if we have finished downloading, and if we have, passing either an error or success message to our console. Open up your Node console and navigate to where you want your web scraping application to be. We'll first create a directory for our files, call it scraping proj, and I will cd into our folder. We're going to create a new JavaScript file for our first set of examples. I'm going to create an npm init, which will generate a package.json for us. This can be anything. Now we should see our ex1.js file and our package.json file. From here, I'm going to install our npm modules. We'll make sure to use the save flag. And I want to install express, request, Cheerio, path, and handlebars. Once those are all installed, we can open up our JavaScript file. Our ex1.js file will act as our entry point to our server, and we'll create a very basic server right now. We'll also be using the FS module, which is native to Node. And we'll also declare a variable for our port up at the top. These are commas, these should all be colons, or semicolons I should say. And we'll want to make sure that we define a variable for our Express server, which is app. So now in order to get our server running, all we have to do is say app.listen and pass in our port. And to make sure that our server is running, we can log out a response. And to test this out, we simply go to node ex1.js, and our server is now listening on port 8000. Okay, so since this is a tutorial series on web scraping, the first thing that we'll do is scrape the website google.com, and we'll log the contents to our console. We'll first define a variable to pass in as the first argument in our request. So we'll pass the URL as the first argument, and the second argument will be a callback function that will take 3 parameters. Error, the response itself, and the body. We'll be able to use these 3 parameters to display an error if there is an error. We can use response if we want to check for a certain status code like 200 or 404. And we'll use body in order to print out or download whatever it is at the requested URL. So we'll check first if there's an error. If there is, we'll simply log it. Otherwise, we will log the body. So now when we go to node ex1.js, it should print out everything that's included at the Google URL, which will include all the HTML and scripts as well. And we can see we get a printout of all this stuff, including the user agents, all this JavaScript that you would normally find, and we can see that it's ending with the scripted div and the HTML tags. Okay, so it worked. Now what I want to do is I want to download the web page and save it as a file to a folder. This will work for anything that you want to download off the web. The one caveat is that you have to name exactly what it is that you want to save the file as, including the extensions So if you want to download an image from a URL, you can do that, but it has to include the extension of JPEG, PNG. The same goes with if we're downloading a full web page, then we'll name it whatever we want, plus the extension .html. Comment this out for now. We'll create a variable called destination. This will be where we want our file to be saved. And this is where we use the fs module that we defined at the top. We can use the create write stream method, which, as you can tell by the name, is a stream. So we're going to be saving this in our downloads folder, which we haven't created yet. So let's do that now. We'll also redefine our variable for our URL. Request allows us to chain methods after receiving the request. So we can use a request passing in our URL, and then we can chain in a pipe method, which we can then pass in our destination. So with this very simple code, we're now able to download google.com and save it into our downloads folder with the name google.html. Okay, so let's test this out. Let's see if it's in our folder. Okay, great, it's right here. Perfect. We can take a look at it, and it's all the information that we found in the console. What didn't happen is that we didn't get any kind of a message letting us know that we received the file that we were trying to download, or any kind of an error message if there happened to be one. When using streams, we're also able to chain on a .on method, which allows us to check if there's an error or when we have received our information back if we want to log a message. So it will look at the same as before, except we'll pass in a .on. Our .on method can take different events depending on what kind of a stream that we're using. So I'll give you the link for the documentation, but since we're using the create write stream, we can use a few different events like finish and .error. So when we've finished downloading a file, we want to print a message to our console saying that we're all done. And we can do it very simply by describing our finish event, passing an anonymous function, and logging our message. In case there's an error, we can also check and log an error message. We'll change this to Google to HTML. And now when we run our file, we should be able to download and save our file to a downloads folder and print a message to our console. And we get our done message. And we see our Google to HTML. We don't have to chain these though. We can use streams explicitly. So we can say destination.on finish and log all done. So this is a perfectly acceptable alternative as well.